Welcome to the Money Focus Podcast. I'm your host, Moses the Mentor. And in this episode, I'm delighted to have Natalie R Williams on the show. She's the founder of the Core Method. And Natalie's innovative approach to personal development and empowerment has made a significant impact. So listen closely as we explore her inspiring journey and delve into her upcoming event. All right, thanks for joining me, Natalie. I really appreciate it. The first thing we always like to do on my show is to start out with talking about a little bit about you and your career journey, and then ultimately how you actually started your business. So the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Well, Moses, thank you for having me. I'm pretty excited to be here and that you want to hear from me. So that is great. And so it's been a very interesting career journey, I would say. So, I recently walked away from a career of 24 years, as a matter of fact, where I started at the age of 19 years old. So I was 19 years old. I was a single mother. I had my first child, my son, actually on my 18th birthday. And so I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. And so there was a call center coming to the environment. And, I made the decision. I said, hey, this might be a great opportunity for me to take care of me and my son. And so that's where it all started. So I started there on a call center back on November the 15th, 1999. So I'll never forget that date. I think that's always going to stick out in my mind. And I did many different things over the course of 24 years. So when I first started, of course, I was just 19 years old. I was a high school dropout. So at that point, I only had my GED. I didn't have any, college education. But over the course of the 24 years there, I had an opportunity to grow within my career. I eventually earned my bachelor's degree in business administration, a master's degree in public administration, did many different things there. So actually, when I left Columbia, South Carolina, I left there as a supervisor within the call center environment. And then I relocated here to Atlanta with the business, government, and national accounts team and spent about 8 years there, did many different things. I started call centers, merged centers together. I eventually became a call center director, also led a large retail organization as well. And during that time, I said, there's an opportunity for me to get involved in a different way. And so I made the decision to then sign up and be a leader of an employee resource group, a Black employee resource group, where I led over 8,000 employees across the globe as a part of that platform. And though I signed up for that opportunity to help others, what I didn't realize was that it was going to actually materialize into an opportunity for me. So I had a chance to engage with many different C-level executives. And in 2020, at kind of the height of when George Floyd's murder occurred, and this awareness around racial and social injustice, an opportunity presented itself for me to move over to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I led diversity, equity, and inclusion workforce and workplace initiatives for the entire organization, over 118,000 employees. And about 2.5 years into that role, I kind of looked up and I said, hey, I've been here for almost 24 years. And, a lot was changing in the landscape around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Obviously, the work was being highly politicized. And, I just had a conversation with myself around how do I make sure that I'm in a role, I'm in a place where I'm making impact. And that's always been very important to me across my career. I want to make sure that I'm able to influence those around me, leverage my platform for good, and make an impact and achieve results. That's the goal. And so I made a very tough decision. I made a decision to walk away from what I have been comfortable with for the last 24 years. And I said, I'm going to pursue my passion. And so that's exactly what I have done. So now I am the CEO of the Core Method LLC. And so it's all things coaching and development, professional and personal development, and making sure that, people are positioned in a way where they can achieve results by ensuring that they're connected to their purpose.
That's a great rundown of your journey, and hopefully inspiring to the audience because, starting out your career, working with the company, growing with the company, furthering your education with the company, and then they rewarded you with opportunities. And it seemed like every time you were presented an opportunity, you stepped in and it fit like a glove. So talk to me now that you don't have that corporate role anymore, how does it feel? Like you're still, walking in your purpose right now, but how does it feel actually owning your business and running it day to day?
Honestly, I'm having the best time of my life. I'm happy.
Okay.
I'm at peace. I am living my true, authentic self, right? I'm able to go after the opportunities that are aligned with who I am. I'm not having to be concerned necessarily about, how do I support someone else's brand? It's about, my brand and how do I take my brand and help and influence others. And so, sure, is it scary kind of stepping out into a territory that, perhaps is unknown? You're having to create everything yourself. You're creating your opportunities yourself, all of those great things. And so, yes, is that scary? Yes. Is it scary when you don't have like your kind of consistent paycheck coming in every 2 weeks? Absolutely. All of those things are very scary. But I would trade that any day to have an opportunity to create the way that I am today and to feel the way that I am today and make the impact in the way that I'm making it on my own terms, not based on what someone else believes should be the path for me or what someone else believes I should or should not be doing. I have an opportunity to create based on all of my experiences over the course of my life and truly make an impact the way that I want to. And so that is a very freeing feeling. One of my kind of phrases that I've always used across life is live free. Well, I can tell you right now, I absolutely like living free. I'm living free. I'm making an impact. I'm doing what I want to do. And oh, by the way, all of that is aligned with what I believe my God-given purpose is, and that's to serve others. And that's a great place to be at.
That freedom is key, and other entrepreneurs and people who've made that jump, that's what they describe. So, it's something that people that have aspirations to go down that path, I definitely would look forward to that same feeling. But on the flip side, though, what are some of those challenges that you've experienced so far? Tell us both sides of the coin. So what are you experiencing so far?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier this kind of feeling of fear or sometimes anxiety, right? When you know that you're having to create your book of business, if you will, on your own, right? And oftentimes you're creating that business based off of, your credibility, perhaps those who have engaged with you over the course of the years, the product that you put into the marketplace, being able to solidify this actually solving an issue for an individual or an organization. And so, when you're creating that type of environment, you really start thinking about, well, what's the longevity and being able to sustain this over the long term? And so I would say if there were any challenge, right? Because I always look at challenges as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to better understand who I am in those moments. And so I really look at challenges and barriers as an opportunity to actually achieve success. And so that's just my state of mind. But I would say that kind of one feeling or that one thing that can be a challenge is, generating the business, right? How do you go out? Where do you go in the marketplace? What are the tools or resources that you're going to utilize? I myself, I'm funding my own organization, right? So making the right decisions around where I invest capital, where I'm investing my time, right? Because it's a one-man show pretty much right now between myself and my husband, right? So it's just really important. Like all of those things I've learned over the course of my career, right? Like your ability to plan, having a plan, establishing goals for yourself, establishing milestones, celebrating the small wins. Like you don't realize or appreciate how much those things mean until you're in a situation like this one where you're having to create on your own without kind of the backing of a Fortune 20 organization. And so I'll say if there's any challenge, it's that challenge, right? Just understanding, making sure that the business plan, your goals are solid and that you achieve what you set out to achieve, that you're achieving the outcomes and that you're continuously creating and building success. And for someone like myself, I'm a classic A-type personality. So I'm that person that's going to get after it. Like when I want it now. I want it to happen now, right? And so when you have that type of personality, it works in a lot of circumstances, right? But it can certainly be a challenge or a barrier when things aren't moving as quickly as you would like for them to move, right? So that, I would say that's probably the biggest challenge that I've had thus far.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you can fill in the gaps if I'm misstating it, but as far as like making it a business, because a lot of folks I talk to, they have a great idea, they got a vision, it all sounds great, but really formulating a business plan is really important, and then driving it through like your planning and organization, and like you said, and you need some money to actually funnel down to bring it to fruition as well. So, do you think that some of the things that you did in your corporate career help catapult you now as a full-time entrepreneur?
Absolutely, for sure, right? So I've always been a planner, right? And so when you think about any organization, any business where your goal is to drive revenue and growth, there must be a plan in order for you to do that, right? You have to understand who's your target market, where's your niche, right? What perhaps might you need to grow your business, to scale your business. Like all of those things are considered when you think about your image, your brand identity, all of those things are critically important. I would certainly say that if I did not have the experience that I've had over the course of my career to understand, like, those are the things that I need to be prepared for, I need to be thinking about, right? I will also say too that sometimes we can overthink things, right? We can overthink it. We're trying to over engineer a plan. And I would say to folks, like, just get started, right? If you do have a vision, if there is something that you want to accomplish, the best thing that you can do for yourself is to write it down. Write it down. So at least you have some framework and some guidance in terms of the direction that you're wanting to go into. But I also think it's important not to stifle progress because you're striving for perfection. But absolutely, the experiences that I've had, whether it was in customer service, whether it was running, a retail organization, within the human resources function that I had a responsibility for, all of those roles required having a plan, right? Being very clear and intentional around the outcomes, being able to communicate that very clearly to stakeholders, to those who are going to invest time, dollars into the plan. And then also, like I said, establishing those milestones so that you can circle back and say, here was the idea, here was the thought, here were the outcomes, here's where I might need to make adjustments in the plan, here's what I'm prepared to do to make sure that I overcome any challenges that exist. And then even when I think about, my brand and what I want my brand to be and what's the identity and what's my vision, like all of those things, right? Having those experiences within the corporate environment, certainly, I said today, everything that I have experienced over the last 24 years of my career has absolutely prepared me for where I'm sitting at today.
Yeah, so like people need to really focus on embracing the journey.
Mhm.
If you have entrepreneurial pursuits and passions, perfectly fine, but also take the time to build off of what you're doing today if you are working a corporate job, because those transferable skills is just going to help you propel your business once you get started.
Yeah.
So I 100% agree.
Well, and and
Um,
I used to always say this to my teams, right? So I think that in the world that we're living in today, number one, we have multiple generations, represented within the workforce, more than we have ever had in any moment in time in history. And so what organizations certainly have to understand is that, employees, especially, you think about your Gen Z generation in the workforce today, your millennial generation that's in their 30s today. Many have interests outside of their kind of 9 to 5 corporate job. They have skill sets, they have interests, they have passions that perhaps they may not be able to actually kind of create fully within their 9 to 5 role. So a lot of people that I've known over the course of my career they've always had what I call a side hustle or something else that they were doing. And I would always talk to my teams about, of course, you're here in this environment today to produce these results. This is what you were hired to do. But what's also really important is that you understand, what can you take away from this experience that's going to get you closer to ultimately where you want to be. Like, don't waste time where you are. Don't plant your feet where you are solely focused on what's in front of you. How do you take advantage of opportunities that you have so you can build the skill sets that you need to get closer to where you want to be? Like, that should always be the goal wherever you are.
Yeah. There's a gap, I believe, in leadership and senior leaders, especially, with understanding that a carrot is not always more money or a higher position. Like, everybody doesn't want to be the CEO.
Right.
Some folks just really want to come in, do a good job, feel like they have a sense of belonging, and getting to the core of what they are as a person overall. And I think that's what your business is really promoting is like that purpose, right? Like I'm here today, and I want to do a great job today. And just because I don't want to have that corporate ladder trajectory doesn't mean that I'm not an employee that want to, bring value to your organization. How can you motivate me while still supporting the business initiatives that I was hired for?
Absolutely.
So that's key.
Absolutely. And it's important. And I think leaders should, when you think about creating inclusive environments where employees feel as if they belong, you have to get to know the individual and what motivates them. You can't take for granted that simply because they're in that role in front of you today, or because you have certain aspirations, that you can project that on the other person. That's why it's really important to get to know people for who they are and determine how can you support them on that journey while you have that moment with them.
Very true. So how does your company's mission align with your personal values?
It completely aligns. So my organization is all about achieving results by connecting people to purpose. Like that is the goal, right? And so I firmly believe that oftentimes, life comes at us pretty fast. It goes by very fast too. You can look up and it's 5 years later and you're looking back saying, like what happened? Was I asleep during the last kind of like 5 years of my life? And that's a tough feeling to have when perhaps you had all of these dreams and aspirations of where you wanted to be, and so many years have gone by. Perhaps you've made some excuses. Perhaps just life has happened. And you kind of look back and say, hey, why didn't I do? Right? Like living in regret is that's a tough feeling. And I know for myself, my goal is to never have to say, I wish I would have done. I wish I would have taken advantage of this opportunity. I wish I would have pushed a little bit more, right? Now it's life. Life is life, right? So will you have moments like that? Sure. But the goal isn't to continuously live that way, right? Your goal is to continue to push forward and make sure that you're making progress. And so the core method, that's what it's all about. It's about making sure that you are very clear and intentional about who you are. What is your value system? Why do you want the things that you want out of life? And more importantly, are you able to clearly articulate and communicate that in the spaces and the places with the people where it matters most? Because you can't do it alone in most cases, right? So you need to be very clear and intentional so that, again, when you're presented with opportunities, perhaps if you have a sponsor who's working on your behalf, a mentor, they know exactly how they can help you because you're clear about what it is that you want to do. And so, the mission of the core method completely aligns with what I believe my purpose is on this earth. I believe my purpose is to serve. My goal is to leverage my platform to give back and to do good, amongst others. And that's what the core method is about, making sure that folks are in a position to understand who they are and get closer connected to their purpose so they can deliver results.
So that definitely sounds like a really key differentiator compared to other, personal development programs that's out there on the market. Are there any other things that you would like to point out that makes your company unique?
Yeah, I think that, I feel like I have a very unique story, right? So I started this conversation with you sharing that, hey, I had my first child on my 18th birthday. I was a high school dropout. I was a survivor of domestic violence. Like I can kind of go on and on and on about the many different experiences that I've had over life that's kind of shaped who I am today, right? But I think being able to share that story very clearly, right? And I'm very unapologetic about who I am and how I show up. Like that's really important. And I think being able to share my own experiences and also how I've been able to apply that in places to achieve results, whether it was in the corporate environment, my own personal life, I think that's really important. And the framework, I feel, what sets me apart is that the framework is a 4-part framework. So, and it applies to pretty much any part of life. It can apply to how you might want to achieve a business goal. It can apply to the individual that's establishing goals for themselves. It could apply to the high school student that is trying to figure out perhaps what are they going to college for and why do they want the major that they want. It could apply to the college or university student that's thinking about their career. They've selected, their major in college, and perhaps they're thinking about, well, how do I really make a life out of this once I get out of this kind of academic environment? It transcends any part of life. I believe that purpose is fundamental to the human experience, right? Everything that you do has a purpose. There's a reason why you are doing the things that you do. There's a reason why someone asks for you to execute against a certain goal or target. Purpose is fundamental to the human experience. Sometimes, though, we don't spend a lot of time on understanding the purpose, and that's why we don't necessarily achieve the result or outcome that we're looking for. And that's oftentimes why we don't achieve success. So I believe that's what separates me from, the rest of the kind of programs that are out there that exist. It deals with the human experience first, right? What is the human experience? What's fundamental to the human experience? And how do we make sure we connect the dots to ensure that folks are on the right life path?
What are the four parts of your core method? Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so the core, so C stands for clarity. So kind of going back to the whole discussion around being very clear and intentional around who you are, your value system, your identity. Why do you want the things that you want? Being able to clearly communicate that to others, being very clear and intentional, making sure that you're not compromising your position and where you want to be. O is for optimization. So it's everything around practicing an optimistic state of mind, being optimistic, and also a growth mindset as well, right? So this is life. I will always say things will happen. Challenges and barriers will happen. What's important, though, is who are you going to be in those moments? Are you going to allow a challenge or a barrier or a naysayer or someone who says that you can't get something done, or perhaps you made a mistake, or perhaps you even had a failure? Do you take those things and learn from it? Or do you allow those things to kind of hold you back from moving forward? And so O is really for optimization. How do you take the power of optimism and having a growth mindset to make sure you couple those two things together so that you're always optimizing all of your resources around you? R is for reflection. So I believe reflection is really important. Perhaps you're working on a project and you had a milestone that you needed to achieve. Maybe you were very successful in achieving that milestone. Do you understand why you were successful at achieving that milestone? Like, what actions did you take? How did you show up in moments in time, perhaps where you had to make a presentation or whatever that might be? And on the flip side of that, if you had a failure, do you understand why you had a failure? Like, how did you contribute towards that failure? What might you do differently in the future? So really taking a moment to take a step back to reflect on who you are in certain situations, how you showed up, why things turned out the way that they turned out, so that you're very clear about, okay, how do I move forward and get myself in position to execute? And that's what E stands for. So E stands for execution. So it doesn't matter what you say you're going to do. It doesn't matter what you dream up that you're going to do. It doesn't matter what hopes and dreams that you have. What matters is how you execute and the action that you take, right? And so getting yourself in position where you can take action, where you can execute against your goals, that is the ultimate goal. That's where you need to be at. And so when you take, the core method and pull that all together, and when you're consistent in how you apply that method to your life, that's how I believe that you achieve purpose-driven results. And that's what the book is about as well. So I wrote a book that launched October of 2023. And, I wrote that book because I felt like it would be a really good way, a good foundation for the coaching side of my business. So I'm a certified life coach, a certified executive coach, and also a women's empowerment coach as well. And so I really wanted a framework that folks could utilize and could really serve as their roadmap, if you will. And so the book is about that as well. And so in each chapter, I talk about each one of those concepts. At the end of each chapter, you have I call it a moment of reflection. And so you can actually reflect on the concepts as it applies to you. And by the time you finish that book, you should have a really good plan for what the next steps need to be for you in order for you to get the results you're looking for.
With the core method, I like the fact that it can be blanketed across different needs of people. So what are some common reasons why people reach out to you, and how do you actually help them overcome some of the obstacles in their life? What are some common examples?
Yeah, I think, life, the world around us has changed so significantly just in the last 3 to 4 years, right? The expectations are different. Many of us were working from home for a number of years during the pandemic and all that. I think what it's done generally in society is that, it's had us to kind of pause and take a step back and reevaluate what's truly important to us in life, right? So whether you have a family and children, or perhaps you have a business, or it's your career, but it's really giving you an opportunity to kind of pause and say, who am I? What have I accomplished? Like, what have I learned over the course of this time? And so the most common thing that I hear from clients, for those who are seeking services, is just that, like wanting some clarity in like, what direction do I go in next? And it doesn't matter. It can be folks who are in, they're late into their career. They've been in their career for, 10, 20 years. It can be, folks who are just starting into their career. But it all kind of comes back to this moment of kind of reckoning with oneself, right? When you see the world, the ecosystem, expectations, societal norms are changing. So perhaps everything that you were taught to believe growing up in society is kind of breaking down in terms of perhaps that's not the way that it should be. And so when you see those types of things happening around you, I think inherently it causes you to question to some degree, right? What does that mean for me, right? What does that mean for me today? And then when you start seeing people around you who are moving in different ways, it may also cause you to kind of question, all right, what should my next move be? And perhaps I need some help in kind of identifying what that is. So I would say, fundamentally, what I hear the most from folks is that they're at this point in life where they do want to get very clear about who they are. And they don't want to waste time any longer, right? Like, no one wants to waste time any longer. They recognize that life is moving pretty fast, and I need to get pretty clear about what are these next couple of years going to look like for me, and what do I need to start doing now to make sure that I'm prepared for that.
Yeah, the pandemic definitely, put a lot of things in perspective.
Yeah.
I know in my family, my wife and I, we were dead set on paying off all of our debt during the pandemic. We did that, starting our business during the pandemic. So I can see why you probably get a lot of requests, because people do realize that it's not an infinite amount of time on this earth. And you want to make sure that you're doing things that fulfill you, because the pandemic just happened so fast.
Yeah.
We went to work and then never went back,
Right.
for a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
So in the drop of a dime, things can change. So
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense.
Well, I think too, the other thing I would add is that the workplace has changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think about technology influences, and the goal is to do more with less, right? The goal is to take one full-time headcount and be able to do multiple things, whereas before you might have had 10 people doing that one job, right? And that's happening across multiple industries, by the way, right? It's not isolated to one particular industry. And so if you're that person who recognizes perhaps that maybe there's an opportunity for me to go back and think about what skill sets I need to have to be competitive in the future, right? If I want to accelerate my career within a corporate space, what needs to be true today in order for me to be able to do that? Like, those are real questions that are at top of mind for a lot of people within the workplace environment today, right? Like, what needs to be true about me and my skill set so that I'm competitive? Because whether it's an individual who's coming to me asking for some coaching, or it's an organization that's coming to me asking about talent development, right? It comes back to the evolution that's happening within the workplace right now, and that's happening within the world. And, you mentioned earlier around leaders and sometimes the misconceptions of leaders and their employees. I would say now more than ever, that whole conversation around creating inclusive environments where people feel as if they belong, regardless of what they look like and who they are. That is more critical today than anything else, I believe. That can truly be a barrier for an organization or an individual to achieve any type of long-term sustainable result if that does not exist in the environment. And so I think it's really important to solve for that. And so that's another thing that comes across my desk pretty often, is that whole conversation around inclusion and belonging as well.
Do you prefer working with organizations, or do you prefer the individuals, or is it just a mixed bag?
I think when you have one-on-one time with an individual, you certainly can see shifts much quicker, right? Like, you're not dealing with kind of like the politics perhaps of the environment, the multiple belief systems that can exist within, a corporate environment. When you're in a corporate environment, It's a very different ball game, right? But I enjoy it because you are impacting folks at scale, right? So when I have an opportunity to work with an organization, I'm working with an organization where I will impact folks at scale. So really what I get joy out of, whether it's the individual or it's the organization, is really being able to see people transform and achieve what perhaps they did not think was possible, right? And then really thinking outside of the box in terms of how do we accomplish these goals together.
How do you measure your success as a company? What do you do?
Well, one, it goes back to that business plan, right? So I did this exercise coming into this year. So I created my own performance agreement. I put together my goals quarter over quarter, and based on kind of like what I've done thus far and what I believe is possible, how do I stretch myself to achieve, certain targets, right? And so some may say, really, you put together your own performance agreement? Yes, I did. So that's one thing that I took with me from my corporate environment, right? Because I think personal accountability is important. And, once again, it doesn't matter what I say I'm going to do. It matters what I actually do. So what better way than to hold myself accountable than to put together my own performance agreement with my own goals and targets and what I believe that I can get done. And more importantly, understanding what needs to be true in order for me to get there. So for me, I have certain things like, the number of new clients I want to bring on into the environment. I'm still building to a certain extent, right? And so there are certain programs that I want to be able to bring into the environment. There are certain organizations I want to be able to work with, right? So kind of pulling that together into, this over the next 12 months, this is what I believe I should be able to pull off. And then what does a stretch target look like? That's how I measure, success. But the one thing I always say too is that even if I don't fully meet the target or goal, I still make sure I celebrate the small wins, right? Because, sometimes you can put a plan together for yourself. And, we're harder on ourselves than anyone else can possibly be on us, right? And so, being realistic is really important. But I also make sure that I celebrate any small win that I have. And I also always say to myself is that like this is a journey. This isn't a race. This is a journey. And so, that's how I measure success for myself, is putting together my own plan, my own performance agreement for myself and measuring myself against that.
So you left a 9-to-5 for a 24/7.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I seen that somewhere, and it's so true. I mean, if you're trying to build a brand, build a business, people have this illusion that, it just happens overnight. So I appreciate you really breaking that down. And also you have to be accountable to your results, and the behaviors leading up to those results is the things that you can celebrate. So, if you're trying to get into a certain organization, how many calls are you making? How many people are you reaching out to? And then ultimately that would hopefully drive the leads or the sales that you really are looking for.
Yeah.
So people look at the top line number and they want that instant gratification, but it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time.
And it's a grind. I say, this entrepreneurial thing, that this is a hustle like none other, right? But it's rewarding, right? So when yes, I'm working hours that perhaps I have not worked in quite some time, right? Like it's weekends, it's evenings, it's when I have my device and I can, get in the email or whatever it might be, but it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like work because I'm doing it on my own terms. I'm doing what I believe I should be doing. And so when you're in that space, it's easier to run after it, right? Because you know that what you put in is what you're going to get out, and you're doing it for yourself, right? But I agree. I think sometimes people think about entrepreneurship and they kind of think like out of the gate, like it's this kind of luxurious, like everything just kind of falls in your lap. And that is not the case. Like it is like you are the marketer, you are the salesperson, you are the operations person, you are the customer experience person, you are the branding person. Perhaps you just have the funding to go and hire all those people to do those things. But most people like you and I aren't necessarily in that position. So you truly are, building that, ground up. But it is a rewarding feeling, but it's really important for folks to understand, like you have to be willing to put in the work as well.
Yeah. I can see why a lot of businesses fail. So the fact that you start is a huge success. But the best way to sustain is having a plan. And
Mhm.
you sound like you have a great plan, and it's just about consistency and just building yourself up. So I'm sure you got it. So I'm not even worried about it. Let, let's talk a little bit more about personal development and get some of your opinions on things.
Mhm.
There's a debate out there around personal development and whether or not it should be self-driven or guided.
Mhm.
So, being that this is your space, what's your stance on that?
I believe it's hybrid. Now, here's what I will say. If you want something, if you come to me and ask for coaching, or if you want me to be your mentor, whatever that might be, I can't want it more than you. And so you have to want it just as bad as I want it for you. So I think it's a hybrid approach, right? So one, you have to intrinsically be in a space where you are ready, you are motivated, you are taking the steps towards getting yourself into a better position or moving yourself forward. I think that one, you have to be decided on that before anyone can help guide you towards anything. Because I'm sure you've been in relationships or situations with people or folks you've had conversations with, friends, whatever it might be, where, they come and have a conversation with you. And every time they have the conversation, it's about all of the things that aren't going right, what's not happening. Perhaps you give them advice, multiple times,
Over.
but nothing changes. So just because you're trying to guide or steer that person in a particular direction, it's not going to work until they have decided for themselves that this is what they want. Well, the individual has to be motivated and willing and wanting to move themselves forward before anyone can guide them, I believe, towards any sustainable success, I would say, right? Like I could throw you an opportunity. I could put you in a circle or a room full of people, perhaps, that could assist you. But if you're not ready to take advantage of that opportunity that you're being placed into, then it's all for naught, right? So I definitely believe that it starts with the individual being intrinsically motivated to want more for themselves. And I believe that when that happens, it becomes much easier for someone to help guide them along that path. And that's one of the questions I actually asked, and one of the reasons why I asked this when I'm looking or considering potential clients. Like, well, why do you want to coach? Why do you want to coach? And like, why not? Why now? Right? Because it's important for me to understand, are you doing this because it sounds cool to have a coach? Or are you doing this because you recognize or you've made a decision that you're truly ready to move in a certain direction and you need the guidance to be able to do so? But I think it starts with the individual for sure.
It's great that you asked that question and just don't just accept that, everybody, it's good to know, because when I have some of my direct reports that reach out to me and they say, hey, I got this mentor and I love them, right? And I always ask them, I said, do you always love them? Because I have this approach that your mentor should really make you feel uncomfortable sometimes. If it's always so great and peachy, it's probably an opportunity there for you to seek another mentor or have a different perspective. Because when people reach out to me and they want assistance, I'm going to challenge you.
Yeah.
If you're reaching out for my help, I want to make sure that I put you in a position to grow. And you can't really grow when you're, doing the same thing. So, it's very important that people seek a mentor or a coach that's going to make them feel uncomfortable so they can bust through that and actually be better on the other end.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's key.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Completely.
So this is what I think people ultimately really want. They want a quick fix.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you encourage that sustained effort and patience when it comes to personal development?
I kind of alluded to this earlier. Like, this is a marathon, not a race, right? Like the individual you are today and how you show up today, that didn't happen overnight, right? Whether you have success or whether you had a failure, those things typically did not happen overnight. Everything is a process. Now, are there people who get lucky and perhaps they just come across the right person and they can instantly have some success in a moment? Sure, those things will always happen. But what's really important is that you understand, like when you're working on yourself, that is a lifelong process. And so even when I think about like my coaching programs, typically my coaching programs are at least 6 sessions over the course of a 2 to 3 month period. And in some cases, depending on where you are, right, you may need more time than that. And I always try to build in time for you to be able to reflect on what we've talked about, right, to kind of go back and be able to test things into the environment. And so I just really make sure I focus on the fact that you have to be willing and ready to do the work, right? And so once you start asking yourself questions about how you showed up in certain moments, when you get feedback from other individuals around their perceptions of you, or perhaps how you might engage with other people, like those are very real moments for folks to kind of settle in and digest and be able to say, kind of internalize. And so I just think it's really important just to make sure that, as I'm having conversations, and really for anyone, right, anyone who's on this kind of professional or personal development journey, you did not get to where you are overnight. It didn't happen overnight, right? And so it takes time for you to create your character, who you are, and your value system, and all of those things once you get to better understand who you are. That is a marathon, it's not a race. And so I just encourage folks to think about it that way, so that you're not expecting just this kind of like miraculous change overnight. And that's another reason why it's also really important to celebrate small wins too. And then up front, define, what does success look like for you, right?
For you, not everybody else.
Not everybody else, for you. If what is success? And when I kind of put together like goal sheets for folks, I have them answer that question. What does success look like for you? Because if you're not clear about what success looks like for you, right, you're not going to recognize when it happens. You're not going to be in a position to celebrate your small wins, right? You won't be able to articulate your successes to others if you yourself haven't defined what success looks like. And I also say it's always very important, even when you are within the workplace, to be very clear about what success looks like as well. Like when you're having a conversation with your leader, so outside of a performance agreement, if someone assigns you a project or initiative or a task or whatever it looks like, it's important for you to understand, what does success look like for that individual? If they were to define success for you working on this initiative or project, what does success look like? And so I just think it's really important. Like, you have to be clear. You can't like mix words when it comes to those things. You have to be very clear and intentional so that you are aware when you're having success in an environment, or you're aware when you're not achieving the level of success that you set out or that you intended to achieve.
What are your future goals for the Core Method?
Yeah.
Can you give us some insight into that?
I want to continue to grow and expand and scale. And so, I have the Core Method Guide to Purpose-Driven Results. So I really want to make sure that as many hands as I can get that book into, that is really my goal. And so I really want to see that expanded into the college and university space. I think there's a huge need there when we think about preparing the next generation for the workforce. I think that's critically important. I started our conversation talking about the multiple generations represented within the workforce. And so really, I would like to expand more into the college and university scene. That's really important to me. And I would like to be able to do that through platforms of programming, and then also through platforms of public speaking as well. So I'm also a public speaker. So I really want to make sure that I'm able to expand pretty significantly within that space. I also recently launched a new brand called My Sister's Keeper. And so it's all about women's empowerment. How do we make sure that if you are a woman, how are we supporting one another, holding ourselves accountable, being a support system for one another. And even if you are a man, you're an ally to a woman, right? Understanding how much power, right, there is in your voice and being able to support women. And so I really want to see that platform expand as well. And so I'm actually working on a group coaching program for women, an 8-week program where I'll bring women together and explore those concepts of the Core Method and really kind of create community amongst women so that they have the support that they need. Because I get a lot of that from the clients that I work with, just kind of looking for that space of community. So really, those are the two places that I really want to expand from. A philanthropic perspective, I really believe that when you think about returning citizens. So those who were formerly incarcerated and now looking to get back into the workforce. Black and brown people are disproportionately, they're disadvantaged from that perspective. And so really being able to utilize the framework to assist those to prepare for the workforce or reentry into the workforce. And then also domestic violence as well. So those survivors of domestic violence, when you're in that situation, being a survivor myself, it can be very easy to feel hopeless, feel as if there isn't a path for you. But I'm here to say that there is a path for you. And so really being able to leverage the framework of the core method there as well. So there are a lot of things that I want to do, Moses. But that, success for me is being able to expand into those spaces more prevalently.
Yeah, that all sounds great. You mentioned my sister's keeper. You have a brunch coming up, right? So,
yes.
Good. Let us know about your brunch.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So so my sister's keep her is what I'm calling it, books and brunch. And really that is kind of the reveal to the bigger platform that I'll have, which is the 8-week program. But I'm bringing women together. I'm bringing about 40 women together in a space where we'll have an opportunity to explore various concepts. So one, the theme is really around how do we educate, elevate, and empower one another and truly be one another's keeper and kind of provide that safe space and community for one another and support. And so I'm bringing folks together. We'll have some brunch. I have a couple of speakers as well. So I have a former chief operating officer within the Fortune 20 who will be speaking and sharing her very impressive journey and story and why sisterhood is critically important in those spaces. I'll also be hosting a fireside chat with a former colleague of mine as well, who has also recently ventured out into this entrepreneurial space and very much so focused on professional and personal development for women as well. And then I'll also be facilitating a mini workshop during the session where I'll talk more about the concepts of the core method, how that applies in the vein of sisterhood. We'll have a couple of creative exercises. I am a creative at heart, so I love doing exercises. Okay. So if someone says do a training exercise, like I am your girl, I'm your woman for that. And so we have a DJ and all that kind of great stuff. We have praise and worship as well. So we'll open up with a prayer. We'll close with a prayer. Faith is really important to me as well. As you can see, I have on my shirt that I created, Life, Living Faith Every Day. So that's certainly how I live every day. So this is my first run at it. And I'm pretty excited about, having an opportunity just to bring, women together in a safe space and be able to explore these concepts. And the goal is to truly make an impact on, even if it's just one person, right? If it's just one person, then I've done my job.
I'm starting to get jealous because I've been interviewing a lot of ladies and it's always women empowerment. And I love the ladies. I'm a girl dad, so I get it. So, but I might have to start my own male empowerment group because we're getting outnumbered. So shout out to the ladies. That sounds great. So what final thoughts or advice would you like to share with the audience? And also let us know how we can reach you, your website, or your social media. Just, give a rundown for us before we close out.
Yeah, I think there are two things I would leave folks with. So I told you I'm like the quote queen, I'm the acronym queen, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so, first I'll just kind of start with this whole concept around life. Life comes at us pretty hard, quick, and fast, right? And I would say it's really important to focus on what you have control over. And more importantly, when I think about life as living in faith every day. When I say living in faith every day, I'm not trying to dictate to you what your belief system should be from a religious point of view or perspective. It's not really about that, right? It's about having faith and knowing that as long as you are willing to do the work, as long as you're willing to pick yourself up when you have a fall, as long as you are willing to help other people around you, as long as your intentions are good, as long as you're leveraging your platform for good, as long as you are trying to figure out how do you learn in this life and get better and keep moving forward, that's how you position yourself to live in faith every day. And of course, there will be fear. There will always be fear. The goal is not to allow fear to stifle, your progress. I always say, fear is false evidence appearing real, right? You'll have many people around you who will support you. You'll have just as many people around you who will be naysayers and say that this can't be possible, right? You can't do it, right?
Very true.
You yourself sometimes can be your biggest blocker or barrier because you're living inside of your head, conjuring up all of these potential things that could happen, what could go wrong. I encourage folks to think in the vein of what could go right? What success could I achieve? What's the worst that could happen if I take a bet on myself? So, those are the things that I would leave with folks is like, take a chance on yourself, right? Don't allow fear is a natural human emotion. Got it. Get it. It will happen. But don't allow that fear to stifle your progress. And more importantly, make sure that you're living in faith every day. And so I'm always on LinkedIn, Natalie R Williams. So that's a great way to connect with me. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok. I have a YouTube channel as well. So Natalie Williams. So if you search for Natalie Williams on Instagram, is I am Natalie Williams. YouTube is Natalie R Williams, and TikTok is also Natalie R Williams. You can find me on X as well. My website address is www.thecoremethodllc.com. So any one of those channels, you can always connect with me there. I'll make sure I try to stay active in social media land just to stay connected with folks. But I would love to connect. So definitely check me out. And thank you so much, Moses, for having me on today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I'll make sure to include all that contact information in the show notes. Thank you for a great conversation. And we're out.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks again, Natalie, for joining the show and sharing your valuable insights. It was truly a pleasure. I really enjoyed the discussion and look forward to having you on the show again. To my listeners, make sure to visit mosesthementor.com. Also, to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Moses the Mentor. And don't forget to download this episode if you're listening in on your favorite podcast platforms. I'm available across the board. So until next time, stay focused on your journey and have a great day. Peace.